Okay, so here's the Hammerli TAC R122C. I wanted to make this video because I found it a pretty interesting firearm to take apart. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of how I do it. Maybe it'll help you out when you go to clean yours. So to start off, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the muzzle brake, because the barrel's attached to the action. So when you pull the action out, you need to have the muzzle brake off. So the muzzle brake isn't tight in very hard. I have a pair of cannon plug pliers from the yard store. They got a rubber grommet on it. It helps without, to keep it from marring. So now that we have the muzzle brake off, we'll go ahead and take it apart pretty much just like you would do with any standard AR. You pull out your pivot pin and your takedown pin. Now these pins will come out completely. They're only held by a ball detent. Oh, now that you have that, now that you have the muzzle brake off, you're gonna have to pull kind of tight. Now from this point, if you don't do heavy shooting with it, you can go ahead and spray it out and re-lubricate it and clean it. You got your bolt lock, your bolt catch here. So if you pull your bolt back, you can lock it in place, and that'll allow you to run a bore snake or something through it to clean it up. If you do a lot of heavy shooting, then you're gonna want to disassemble this to get it cleaned up pretty good. If you're gonna do that, you need to make sure that you apply the same tension to the recoil spring that you had in to begin with. So you can either count the amount of threads that are exposed from your set screw, or if you have a pull gauge, you can use a pull gauge, see what it's at before you start, and then reset it to that tension once you put it back together. With this being 22lr and the small caliber, it's not extremely critical that it's completely perfect, so I just count my threads. I got 3 exposed threads, and I'm just going to remove it from there. When you are removing this, be cautious that that spring is under tension, and when this set screw comes out, it's going to want to fly. Like that. So you got your set screw. Okay, so you're gonna have one plunger in the front of the spring. You'll have one plunger in the back of the spring, and then your set screw will go in front of that, or behind it where you set your tension. Both your plungers are going to be the same, so it doesn't matter which side goes where. Now once you have that taken apart, go ahead and remove. You're going to remove the 5 screws that hold the action together. You're going to have 2 shorter screws on top and 3 longer screws on the bottom. Couple things to keep in mind: the heads on these bolts are not, or the bolts themselves are not the greatest or hardest material, so they will round out on you. As you can see, this is all I use to take it apart, because once I put it back together, this is all I use to torque it down. Just good and tight, and that's it. That'll help keep the bolts from rounding out, and at the same time, like I said, it's a 22lr. I'm not having any problems just by torquing it like that. The screws do have a little bit of Loctite on them from factory, so I just keep reusing that. If this was a higher caliber, I'd go ahead and I'd probably worry more about the torque and all that other stuff. But with it being just a 22lr, I'm just gonna torque it down like that. We're going into aluminum. Any high torque, it'll strip out the aluminum, so you gotta be careful with that stuff. I'm not gonna go over cleaning because I've already cleaned this one out, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how I break it down to clean it. Because I do take it, every time I take it, I shoot 500-600 rounds through it, so it does come back pretty dirty. So your barrel just come out of there easy, but you do have detent with your pivot pin, or you do have a detent with a spring here that applies pressure to the bolt catch. So when you are cleaning, be careful with that. You don't want to damage that. That's as far as I go to take that apart. I will take apart the bolt assembly so that I can clean out the firing pin and all inside there. If you do, there are 2 springs in here that can go flying on you, so you need to be careful with that. And this is also aluminum, so you got to be careful with that. You just come in here and push out this pin, get it out as far as you can, and then just use a pair of pliers to pull it out the rest of the way. Once that's out, you can go ahead and separate the 2 halves of the bolt. Now, as I was telling you before, you have 2 springs in here. One of them is for your extractor, and you can see it's under tension. It's all curled up there. It's fine. That's not going to damage it. That's exactly how you'll put it back together. But you want to be careful when you're popping it out that it doesn't go flying on you. So you'll have the spring with your extractor plunger. All right, that's what's going to put pressure on your extractor. And pull out your extractor after the spring's out. And you can raise up your firing pin, and you'll have that spring down there that you also need to be careful with. Because as you're removing your firing pin, it can go flying on you. Now, to put this back together, you're going to slide in your firing pin spring, and you're going to want to leave it up at an angle like that. And you're just going to work backwards. You got this notch at the bottom of your firing pin. Set that behind the spring, compress the spring and push down, and that'll lock in place like that. Once you have that, you can go ahead and put your extractor back. Slide your spring behind it. put my finger on top here to keep the spring from flying. And you're just going to curl that spring up the same way it was before. That's how it should look there. And be careful putting on your top. You just want to kind of push down on that spring and your top will snap into place once it's there. It'll just be a small little niche, but just to verify before you do anything else, move your extractor and make sure that it's moving properly and that it's got tension. Then slide your pin back in. I will say that the first time you remove this, Walther will pin the edge to lock that pin in place. I have not found the reason why I need to re-pin it back so far. I haven't had any issues with it drifting out, so I've left it like that. But if you do see that your pin starts drifting out, you might want to re-pin it back in place. Okay, again, check your extractor and check your firing pin. Make sure it's going all the way out. When you go to put your barrel back in, you got to make sure this barrel lug in the bottom completely compresses that spring and detent for your bolt catch. You may need to find something really thin so you can push that in all the way. I'm just going to use a plastic pick to push that all the way in. And then push your barrel all the way down. Okay, so now that you got your barrel in place, go ahead and put your bolt back in. Set the top of your housing on. And once I have that on like that, I'll slide my bolt forward and back, make sure it's good, and then I'll just go putting the nuts and bolts in place in a cross pattern. All the nuts and bolts are the same thread pattern. So the only real difference is that on the top you got the short ones, and on the bottom you got the longer ones. Again, I'll do a quick little function test. Make sure that this is working right. Make sure that my bolt lock engages the bolt, that it comes back down, and then I'll just snug up. And we'll take one of the plungers, put it on the spring, slide the spring in. That'll drive your bolt all the way forward. With the second plunger on the back of the spring. Now here's where things go flying. So keeping tension on your set screw. Set it in there and then try to tighten it by hand a little bit to try to engage it. And then just tighten your set screw. And then I'll just tighten my set screw back to where I have my 3 threads showing. And make sure you're using the same location. So if you identified the 3 threads on the left side, use that side. If you identified 3 threads on the top or bottom, whatever side you use, do it to the same side. That's it there. Do a function test. Then we could go ahead and put this back on the upper in a minute. So as for your lower, you really don't need to do anything here. At the most, if you want, you can drop in a couple drops of oil. That'll be fine. But your trigger's is enclosed in a plastic housing. And to take the plastic housing off is not a big deal. You'll start by removing your mag release. Your safety is in there with a ball detent. So all you really have to do is just push it out. Once you remove your pistol grip, your trigger assembly will come out. You don't need to do anything to this. If for any reason this isn't working properly, you feel it needs to get cleaned, anything like that, take it to a smith. This is it's kind of a pain. Parts go flying the moment you open this. I've already opened it once. And it's just a headache that you don't want to have to deal with, I guarantee you. So from what I've seen, this really doesn't get dirty. A little bit of oil in whatever areas are exposed, you should be fine. I really don't recommend opening this down the line. If you guys are really interested in knowing or going through the steps of opening this and all that, let me know in the comments. I'll make a video on it. But I do not recommend anybody going into this for any reason unless there's something seriously wrong with it. But when you do pull this out, your bolt release is just floating in there. This does nothing on this firearm whatsoever. It just kind of sits in there for decoration. You can blow this out, clean it, wipe it down. That's all fine. Just make sure that you get your bolt release back in place before you set your housing back in. I'll just pop in place there. Set your safety back in, just pop it in. Guard back on now. If your trigger's down, you got your trigger bar that comes down, so you got to watch that when you're trying to put your guard on, because the guard That'll go into the larger hole, and your screw goes into the smaller hole in the back. If it gives you any grief, just go ahead and let your hammer up, and it'll be out of the way. It won't cause an issue. Make sure when you put your screw back on that you got your lock washer on there. Kind of snug. The one nice thing about this design is that it's very simple. It's been very simplified. So you don't have all your detent springs and all that going on back here that go flying on you or any of that stuff. The biggest risk of springs flying or anything are going to be in your trigger guard, your trigger housing. So now we'll just slide our action back in place. Put your charging handle on there. Just push it in just like that. Go ahead and put our upper and lower back together. Go ahead and put our mag release back on. I like to put a little bit of this Carlson choke tube lube on there, just because removing the muzzle brake is part of the cleaning process. It'll keep it from freezing up. I will say this firearm does not like lead rounds. It jams a little bit. The biggest issue with the lead rounds is that they start to fragment inside the barrel. It looks pretty dirty. That's standard. Not really seeing rifling. It looks like the lead just... So this is what I was saying before. The lead just kind of fragments in the barrel. And after 300-400 rounds, your muzzle brake will start getting clogged with lead, and it'll just get stuck there. You'll have to pick it out when you go to clean it. If it's not a big deal for you, it really isn't for me. I'm still shooting lead out of it, but if it's a big deal for you, then you can just use coated rounds. I am planning on at some point trying to polish the ramp to see if it keeps it from catching on the lead. when it does catch, it is significant. It deforms the bullet and tries to peel a chunk off of it. Other than that, really fun gun to shoot. I have a great time. It goes with me to the range just about every time I go. I'm a big fan of 22 and the cost. So that is the disassembly and assembly of the Walther Hammerli. If you have any questions, please let me know. We'll see you on the next one.